number. So the guys, the businesses that are founders, are you B2C, B2B? Okay. Anybody B2G? We got two. Mike's not raising his hand, but you're B2G, sort of. We're working on it. All right. And who is looking for investors? That's kind of the boilerplate question for the. Who's looking for investors from the United States government who won't take your equity? Yeah, that sounds pretty cool, doesn't it? All right. So we're going to cover a few things. We're not actually going to cover all this stuff in detail, but over the course of AMAs of this nature and the defense programming events that we do here at Capital Factory, you'll get exposure to all of those things. So why startups should work for the government? Anybody want to offer like the #1 reason why startups should work for the government? Yeah, the thing that I just said about how them giving you money and not taking your equity. That's cool. What is the #1 reason not to work for the government or not to work with the government? Yeah, they're huge and slow and a giant pain in the butt. So we'll talk a little bit about some solicitations, different types of opportunities to work with the government, and then who knows what FedBizOpps is? Okay, who knows what the FAR is? All right, what does it stand for? There you go. And then some of the folks that we have here in the building, Defense Innovation Unit, who was the first mover in this space, really for the entire DoD, and definitely here in Capital Factory, as well as AFWorks, NGA, and then the big whale that showed up last summer, Army Futures Command, and the Army Applications Lab. So I guess let me peel back a little bit. I didn't intro myself. I don't usually spend a whole lot of time talking about myself. My name is Kevin Lantroop. I am the Defense Venture Partner here at Capital Factory. So essentially what that means is I am responsible for understanding what our defense customers in the building want, the types of programs that they're going to use to acquire those things, the ways that our startups can get connected to those different lines of business, and then really curating the Capital Factory companies, be they member companies, accelerator companies, or just companies that are coming through this building that we want to get plugged in and help them understand where they fit and how to do business. So I mentioned that we do the fundraising in Texas AMA the first Tuesday of the month. Second Tuesday of the month is Intro to the Austin Startup Scene. Third Tuesday of the month, Defense Innovation. And then the fourth is Pitch Practice and Founder Stories. All of those will happen right here in the space. So I definitely recommend if you're interested in fundraising and you haven't been to the Intro to Fundraising, go to it, because there are tons of tools associated with this building and a way that Capital Factory does things to connect you to fundraising that's definitely good to learn about. And then if you're new to the area or just new to entrepreneurship in general in Austin, the Intro to the Austin Startup Scene is really cool as well. All right, so this chart is not just about like defense innovation in Texas. Really, this chart is about why Army Futures Command came here. Army Futures Command coming here is the reason why there are so many people right now in this building. There's a reason why the Sergeant Major of the Army, like the senior enlisted person in the entire United States Army, just randomly showed up on the 8th floor about 20 minutes ago. Popped back into Army Applications Lab to get a briefing from their team. So this is a footprint of all the military installations and activities in Texas. It's actually the other stuff around. One place that probably doesn't come up in your consciousness a whole lot, Ellington Field Joint Reserve Base, which is in Houston, Texas, is the home of the 75th Innovation Command, which is an Army Reserve organization that's built. So the Army Reserve are people, ordinary citizens, if you will, who serve in Army units in the summer and on the weekends. I know we have at least one Army Reserve alum in the back of the room, Mr. Dan Hargrove. Anybody else serve in the armed forces or serve in the currently serving in the reserves? All right, well, so there's 3 of us. But the 75th Innovation Command is a reserve unit, so these are folks that are civilians most of the time. They're soldiers on the weekends and during the summer, but that unit is built up primarily of like founders and technologists, and their whole job is to help find companies and get them plugged into Army Futures Command, because they are actually a component of Army Futures Command. So that's really interesting, and not something that really I think is well known. Everybody, if you're from Austin or from Texas, you probably have heard of San Antonio and all the Air Force activity there, and Fort Hood in the Army activity there, but that's a new one. So this is kind of like the snapshot of defense innovation as it applies specifically to Austin, Texas in this building. Back in 2016, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter decided that he was going to stand up the Defense Innovation Unit as a way for the government to access emerging technology, primarily focused on Silicon Valley. But the basic problem statement was, you know, the private sector is pumping out new, innovative technologies and applications like daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, and the Department of Defense takes like 10 years to buy anything, right? And so by the time you acquire it, there have been 20 things that have been invented since you first started thinking about buying that thing, and so your thing that you just bought really is no longer relevant. And so the Defense Innovation Unit was started in 2016 as a personal project of the Secretary of Defense Ash Carter. They came here shortly thereafter and established the first presence in Austin, Texas. And they chose the Capital Factory not because the Capital Factory was a center of defense innovation. They chose the Capital Factory because the Capital Factory was the center of gravity of innovation and entrepreneurship in the state of Texas. And so this was the place where they knew they were going to find essentially y'all. Not too long after that, the Air Force started up their own innovation cell called AFWorks. AFWorks has a cell here that's about 8 full-timers, and then they have a lot of folks that rotate through. AFWorks executes primarily SBIRs, but they do a lot of pitch competitions. They are very, very quick and flexible about how they contract with folks whenever they find something that they really like. And we actually have Patrick here, who is a recent recipient of an AFWorks SBIR, who's going to tell us about his experience. And then the big elephant, or the whale, if you want to call them that, Army Futures Command. The decision was made in July of 2018 that Futures Command was going to locate their headquarters here in Austin. They activated on August 24th, 2019, so very shortly after that. And Capital Factory opened up the Center for Defense Innovation on the 8th floor, which you guys all saw 8th floor on the tour, I'm assuming, is that right? That opened up in February of this year. So still very new, very much a startup, very much iterating towards their business models, how we're going to help serve their needs, and how we're going to get our companies plugged in. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is find the most innovative solutions, find the most rapid and agile contracting methods that they can do, smash those two things together, and get the best capabilities that we possibly can to warfighters as quickly as possible. And then the empty space on the timeline, we don't know what this is going to be. But the fact that you guys are all here, the fact that so many people are coming through here all the time, the fact that our TDIF event last night was so well attended, is what's going to make it all work, and it's going to be something awesome. That's the goal. Okay, so I introduced myself. The photograph in the middle there, Helena Krusik, is a venture associate who works out of Dallas. Did anybody in this room not know that there's a Capital Factory in Dallas? There's a Capital Factory in Dallas. It's in Oak Lawn. It opened up last year, so it's less than a year old. But we're extending the bubble up to Dallas. There are actually a ton of more traditional defense companies in Dallas, but there's also a ton of startups in Dallas. And we want to try to get those folks connected too. Helena's leading our effort there. And we actually have, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody in this room hadn't seen this solicitation or even applied for it, but we're hiring for a position for Defense Programs Coordinator, and we hope to have that individual onboarded very soon as the kind of regular point of contact for these types of events and activities. So there's a photograph of the Center for Defense Innovation being opened on February, I want to say it was like 23rd or something like that, here on the 8th floor. And for the first time this year, and this is actually, I think, a bigger point than people realize, for the first time this year, there was an official defense technology track in South by Southwest. There were like 30 defense technology focused events, and we had literally anybody who is anybody in DoD and government S&T coming to South by, sitting on panels, participating in panels, just attending events, soaking up all the awesome that is South by, probably eating way too many tacos and maybe having a few too many beers, but that's South by. But it was really cool. First year, we're just going to make it better and better each year. So multiple year-round events. So the South by Defense Innovation Track was the first time this year. We have a Startup Week Defense Track. So Startup Week is this year, I believe, September 30th to October 4th, and there will be a bunch of events. The really interesting thing about that is, so we did the first defense track for Startup Week last year, the first defense track for South by Southwest this year. Now we've actually got our government partners that are here in the building kind of planning ahead and seeing these events as part of their cycles. And so I really believe that for Startup Week this year, we're actually going to have like Air Force here doing pitches and giving away contracts. We may have Army here doing pitches and giving away contracts as part of those events. So definitely cool, definitely going to get better. But these are the different types of events that we've had. You know, like this US SOCOM Foundry is a really interesting thing that happened here last month, where it was a 3-day design, thinking, problem-solving event where really we just got a bunch of super different and super smart people in a room, gave them a fairly complicated problem statement. They all independently broke up into teams and iterated towards ways that that problem could be solved. And what that gave US SOCOM was a focus on what types of technologies do we need to be investing in. And Brandon's in the back of the room can tell you, I think it was something about autonomous robots or something to that effect was the thing that they decided that they really needed to focus some program. Did I get that right?
Yeah,
focus.
Laser beams on them.
Yeah, so robotic sharks with laser beams on their heads. Anybody here building that? I'm talking. All right. And then challenges is just the routine run of events. So Army Futures Command is best described as a consolidation and unification of all of the Army's S&T and modernization efforts into one organization that can prioritize and allocate funds against those problems. So there are a disparate number of organizations within the United States Army that do S&T, some of whom are actually in the back of the room, and you'll hear from one of them on the panel up here in a minute. But Army Futures Command was a really transformative effort to create a new 4-star command, which previously there were only 3 Army level 4-star commands, and now there are 4, so kind of a big deal. Putting them here in Austin, Texas, and not on a military base, another thing that was kind of a big deal, but also to unify all of that effort around defense, around modernization of the Army, so that we can continue to be relevant and superior to our adversaries, you know, at 2028 and beyond. The Defense Innovation Unit, so that's their slogan. Essentially what the Defense Innovation Unit is a broker between DoD customers who have problems and non-traditional partners companies who can solve those problems. And they will package those things through what they call a commercial solutions opening, which is a way of communicating problems to the field. They receive solutions in different ways in the form of white papers and very brief pitch decks, and it's a very easy way to get involved. And then if they like your technology, you can get a contract, and really the numbers vary anywhere from, you know, $15,000 or $20,000 all the way up to several $1 million, depending on what the solution is that they're looking for. But the best thing is that they literally can write the contract from scratch. There's no FAR provisions, there's no mandatory IP licensing or rights. It's all what works for you, what works for them. Let's write a contract and let's make a product. AFWERX, as I mentioned before, AFWERX is the innovation arm of the United States Air Force. They essentially take hard problems generated by the various major commands within the Air Force, figure out ways to socialize those in non-traditional ways. They do a lot of pitch contests. They do a lot of special topic SBIRs, which are an SBIR type of contract, but it's a little faster, a little more streamlined. And they actually have been extraordinarily active here. And one of the really interesting things about AFWERX, which I find very interesting, is they took an AFWERX challenge, which was really a series of pitch contests around a bunch of different areas that fed into pilot training, found a solution that they really liked, which is using biometric measurements and AR/VR to create a individually tailorable flight training program. So the way it used to work is each pilot, like you would do, 27 days of this task and 35 days of this task and whatever of this task, and everybody did the same thing, right? And it took 19 months to train a pilot. Well, they said, what if we determine what if the number of hours or days that you spend on a task is related to how well you actually learn that task, and we can measure that some way cognitively, And they figured that out using, like I said, biometric measurements and AR/VR enabled training, and now they can churn pilots through in 5 months. And those pilots are actually better trained than the ones that go through the traditional course that takes 19 months. Like, think about that. Like, they calculate that this is going to cut the cost of pilot training in half, save them tens of billions of dollars. And oh, by the way, the companies that participated in this already have a program of record contract for the Air Force, which that's, for any company that wants to get involved in defense contracting, getting a program of record is the real deal. That's where Congress says, your contract is going to get this much money this year, and this much money next year, and this much money the next year. Like, there's nothing like that for like consistency of revenue, right? So they got that. They got literally from a challenge that was formed in this building last summer to a program of record that's going to kick off in FY20, so in October. Pretty phenomenal. And then National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, they don't like me to talk about them. They're in Intel. They'll get with you if you have something that sounds interesting. All right, so why this transition in how the government looks at technology? So these two curves roughly represent how much money in R&D is spent in the commercial sector and versus the government. So after World War II, the government was spending most of it, right? And then at some point the curves crossed, and then now, as you can see, I don't like charts like that are really imprecise, but basically what's happened is the curves have flipped. Where it used to be the vast majority of spending in R&D was done by the federal government, now the vast majority of dollars that are spent in R&D is spent in industry. And a lot of that is spent in VC and startups. And so the government wants to be able to access all those solutions that are being generated. And so they're looking at new and different ways to do it, and new and different locations to do it. Capital Factory being one of the premier locations really in the entire country where they've chosen to come. I mean, there's no other place in the entire country where you have the Air Force's technology acquisition arm and the Army's technology acquisition arm and DIU and MD5 and NGA and soon to be a couple of special operations components, and we're talking to Navy, but they're being slow. The boats don't go nearly as fast as the planes, so they're catching up. But all in one building. The only figures out how they're going to implement the mission of the Army applications a little simpler as we go through. All right, we're going to talk about SBIR a lot here in a minute, so I'm not going to go into that. All right, let's just get to the meat of it. So, and these slides, I think, are publicly available. If not, we can make them publicly available. But there's a couple of things basic things that you have to do if you're a company and you want to do business with the DoD. You have to be registered in the system for award management. You have to have a DUNS number. When you go through and register in the system for award management, you'll get a cage code. We have some really interesting tutorials. One that was actually presented by DIU, and I'm not sure if they did it or not, but it was, yeah, this one, number 2, which we can send out, is a really good one that kind of walks you through like the things that you need to do if you guys are interested in that. Yeah, this is a lot to go through in such a short period of time. So let me just bring the panelists up here, and I apologize because we have one that is missing. So, Nicole, please come up. Mike and Patrick. All right. All right, so let me introduce the panelists. This is going to be very informal. I really want most of the questions to come from y'all, but we'll do some brief intros. And then this is an AMA, so that means you can, nobody wants to say it? Ask them anything, right? All right, so Nicole Fox, I'm going to have to read this, is the Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transfer, SBIR, or SBIR and STTR, as we call it in the biz, for the Army, coordinator for the Army Research Office. Let's see. Orchestrating over $29 million in program activity per year. That's pretty good. more than 12 years of experience in all aspects of Army SBIR and STTR program operations, policy, and contracting, managing numerous activities through these programs to help small businesses get their technology fully developed, tested, and commercialized in products and services used by Army warfighters. Mike, I'm going to read yours too, even though I know you really well. So Mike Mayo is a former Air Force officer. He's the co-founder and president of Nanomics. Nanomics has more than 15 years as the head of Nanomics. Mike has led the team's strategic business planning, commercial partnerships, and technical direction, as well as all financial and resource management of the firm. All right, I'm not going to read all that. So I brought Mike up here because Mike's company so Nicole obviously has extensive experience from the program management side. So in GovSpeak, if you were a program manager, that means you were essentially responsible for executing the budget in that program against whatever the problems or the topics or the acquisitions or the requirements that are wrapped up underneath that program. So she obviously understands the SBIR process very, very well. Mike, with Nanomics, they are an applied science and materials firm that have executed, how many SBIRs have you guys done? 50, 100, 3,000?
140 phase ones and 50 phase twos.
Okay, so that's a lot. 50 phase twos.
Phase three is good.
So he obviously knows about how to submit proposals against SBIRs. He probably knows a little bit about which programs are more receptive and easier to get at than others. He definitely knows about invoicing and about how to structure your proposals such that you can actually win the contract, but at the same time, you can actually get the money in the right way that it's useful to you. Because you certainly don't want a $750,000 project where you get paid at the end, because that becomes a little bit of a challenge. Patrick is a Capital Factory member company, and so Mike's also, Nanomics is a Capital Factory member company. Patrick Hitchens has a company called FitRanks, which is an application that essentially is a way to build teams through an app around physical fitness activities. Patrick's app has got some traction with Broward County, Florida Sheriff's Office.
The largest police force in the country.
As well as HEB. So essentially these companies, these organizations are using his app to create teams that can compete against each other for fitness goals. Patrick has gotten an SBIR, an AFWorks SBIR phase 1, so he's he's submitting his application to apply to get into phase 2. And I thought the really interesting thing about Patrick's application was Army Reserve organizations. As I told you before, an Army Reserve organization, they're a civilian. They have civilian jobs. Some of them have started their own companies, and they get together with their reserve unit once a week on the weekend. But they kind of have a requirement to be militarily ready, which means you have to be physically fit all the time. You can't be physically fit if you only exercise one day a month, right? So the app is a way for leaders to set goals for their teams, put teams together on the app, and monitor progress against those goals throughout the week. So I think it's got really good applications for the reserve components of the armed forces. But he's here right now because he's a founder, a startup who's trying to get to that phase 2 in his very first SBIR. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to these guys, and I'm going to let you give, if you wouldn't mind, please tell us about your program, about your role and what you guys do.
Certainly. As you mentioned before, I'm Nicole Fox. I work at the Army Research Office, which is in Raleigh, Durham, or the Research Triangle Park. I've been doing SBIRSTTR for well over 12 years now. I work directly with 45 program managers, and during that time I've had about 29, is probably my average $1 million a year, to up to about 34 is probably about when I've maxed out a few times. I work with CBD, DTRA, DARPA, OSD, and Army, so I've kind of dealt with a little bit of everyone. I not only start with topic development, I go through the entire process of phase 1 selections, phase 2 selections, all the way through being a core on projects and working directly with the technical point of contacts during that time. I'm probably somewhat of an expert with WAF. I've been DCA audited a couple of times.
Can you tell me what WAF is?
Wide Area Workflow. It's where we get our government invoicing through.
Yeah,
so it's a little bit of a nightmare to get in there, but
yeah,
to get those invoices
somebody
approved.
please ask Mike. Somebody please ask Mike about WAF. All right.
I'll send you to.
Do you have a tutorial that I could even share? So it can be fun to get through that system. And I mentioned DCAA audited. I've been audited twice already, and I've survived, so I know you can too. I've worked with probably all aspects of the program one time or another, also assisted with phase 3 contracts, and worked with technical assistant advocates, worked with primes, so had a little experience in probably pretty much every aspect of the program. So any questions you might have, I'd be more than welcome to do my best to answer, or at least get you in touch with the person who can answer.
Mike, please tell us about Nanomics. What are you guys working on right now?
I think I'll first start with, I ran my first SBIR in 1988 as a lieutenant. So I've been involved in the government side and on the company side. So at Nanomics, we're a multidisciplinary team of 40 people, about 40% PhDs, 35% master's degrees in sciences, and the remainder is degreed staff. We only have one non-degreed person, so we're very heavy science oriented. And we do more early stage technology development in electro-optic systems, materials science, semiconductor physics, computational programming. Anything that seems challenging and interesting, we kind of like to solve it. But we also do transition things. We do have a program of record right now through the Army that was SBIR/STTR transition where we went through multiple phases. That particular technology did, I'll put my plug in right now that yes, everybody would love to do one phase 1, one phase 2, and then go to acquisition. That to me is not a super realistic goal. It usually takes a number of phase 2s. Research is that way. You find something out, you pivot someplace, and requirements change. So it takes a little bit of time to do development. So I'm very interested to see how all of this rapid innovation takes place when they talk about 3 months time. The type of work we do, 3 months is kind of a mind blow. That's super rapid. We barely get into the fab at the semiconductor. Like if we have a semiconductor program, I mean, you're barely starting to fab anything, when your materials are coming in. So that's a little bit different. Did I answer the question?
Yeah,
A little bit. I mean,
this is just about
so
you, about your company,
yeah.
and
So our technologies are all over the place. We have programs not just with the DoD, National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, NASA. So I find NASA and DoD, there's a lot of synergy between the type of systems that we develop that are applicable to both those organizations. We have experience across government, and I'm a big proponent of the SBIR STTR program. The government, I was active duty for nine years. I saw the big bureaucracy, but I will say that the government does a great job working with small businesses on these programs, and they understand your pain. They understand your need to pay people. The timelines aren't usually that bad, so I guess don't be frightened of it. Although I guess I shouldn't be promoting competition, should I? It's really, really hard. I wouldn't do it. Well, you get divorced, and your kids will leave.
So Patrick, tell us about FitRanks. Tell us about how old your company is.
Sure.
A little bit of your founder story, and then what in the heck made you decide to go try to get a SBIR?
Yeah, so FitRanks is probably on the other end of the spectrum to you, and we launched in 2015. You did a pretty good job describing what we do. We've created a universal platform that connects to all the different fitness apps and wearables out there. So we work with, as you mentioned, the largest police force in the country on keeping their officers fit. Also work with HEB across their 100,000 employees, keeping them fit. And we work with sports brands and American Heart Association, so a variety of commercial organizations. But we became part of the Capital Factory Accelerator in February, and leading into that, we were co-working here, and I saw AFWorks kind of open the office downstairs. Got a little curious, okay, sniffing around, smelling maybe dollars there. I mean, the government may be a bureaucracy, but the one problem they don't have is usually money, and we should all know that as taxpayers. And so I went in there and I actually was like, hey, we work with the largest police force in the country, we work with HEB. Maybe there's a solution for you guys. Can I come in and just kind of show you what I have? And they invited me in, super friendly, dressed down folk. They look like just about everyone else up in here. So very approachable, and pitched them, and then just kind of kept up the conversation. How many out there are kind of in these enterprise sales businesses? Okay, so fair amount of you. I mean, I'll tell you, HEB was a lot harder to sell to than the Air Force or the U.S. government so far. And the juice that you could potentially squeeze, there's a lot more juice. So to continue the story, basically found out about the SBIR program. I was initially really skeptical of it, and I kind of hit the AFWERX teams like, what are the odds here? Okay, like how many of you guys have done a pitch competition? Okay, so usually the odds for that are pretty bad, I'd say. To get that $10,000 check, there's going to be like 200 people applying. You get 10 people in to pitch, and then you spend probably 5 days getting ready for the pitch. SBIR, when I got down to it, the odds were really actually good, and maybe it was just because of the topic that we were in, but I think it was about, for the first phase, and now they've done a couple cohorts, it was about 200, 300 companies. They picked 100, gave them $50K each, and then of the last cohort that was in phase one, they took about 50% of 100 companies, so 50 companies, and gave them $750K. So if you're doing the numbers, that is pretty impressive, and I would stack that against any enterprise sale you've ever done and the odds you face in that. It's like baseball, if you're hitting 300 in enterprise sales, you're doing well. So that's my kind of limited perspective as a small tech company that's bootstrapped, actually. And the non-dilutive part of the funding is super attractive.
So let's go back a little bit, and I'm going to ask Nicole, what is the SBIR program? Like, how does it work? What's phase one? What's phase two? What's phase three? How much money is involved? How do folks find out what the topics are? How often do they happen? Like, just the basics of it.
Sure. The Army has different problems that they're looking for solutions for, and we call those topics. Topics get published through the SBIR program 3 times a year. Army STTR only uses one of those cycles. Currently, the 19.2 and the 19B are published in pre-solicitation, which is a good thing for all of you.
So 19.2 means it's fiscal year 19, and it's the second offering of that fiscal year. And 19.B, so that's for SBIR. For the 19.B is for small technology, STTR, small.
Now you have me doing it. Small Business Technology Transfer.
Thank you. I'm like, I know the word business is in there somewhere, but it's not on the acronym. Is for more university research, early stage research type stuff. But it's B because it's the second offering for the second cycle of that fiscal year.
And just to give you a little background on what STTR is, it's basically the exact same thing as the SBIR program. The only difference is you as a small business are required to give 30% of the total funding to your university partner, whoever that may be. That's pretty much the main difference between each one of them. We have those cycles throughout the year. The phase one, depending on which program, Army SBIR is 100. K for actually it went up, it's 107 now, I believe it is, and now it's 56, 57 for your option. You only get an option with SBIR if and only if you're selected for a phase 2. They use that as basically bridge funding, so you have that little extra bit of money until that phase 2 contract can be awarded. STTR, Army STTR does not do that. They give you the full 157 for that phase 1. Both of them are 6-month contract. So you have 6 months, the money's divided between those 6 months. It can be negotiated different depending on how you work with your contracting officer. And your phase 2 is, again, you're not invited. Back in the day, we would invite those phase 1s who had been successful. Now, you as the firm, as long as you received a phase 1 award, can submit a phase 2. There are certain cycles, and those are all listed within the BAA. Either that or get in touch with your program manager who you're working with. You would submit your phase 2, and that's up to just over 1 million now. The numbers have recently changed. I still don't have a grasp on it yet. But that's up to 1 million for a 24-month project. And again, that can actually be negotiated down for 18 months. They don't usually go any lower than that. And that would be something you'd work out with your contracting officer. And I think I
What are
answered
the
question.
business size restrictions to participate in the SBIR STTR program?
You have to be a small business, which basically translates to that you're a company of 500 or less employees. And you have to be a for-profit small business.
And as a program manager for ARO,
And not
what
for-
types of problems, what types of solutions do your topics search for?
We have all different areas with ARO. We can have something is from medical all the way down for finding a gizmo for a vehicle or a gun. There's lots of things that we look into, so there's anything specific. That's possibly going to be changing with Futures Command. Probably the best way to say it is there is change coming, we just don't know when and how. We're looking for quicker, faster, better type of way of getting those ideas to you or having you propose ideas to us as Army. Sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes people out in the field might have a better suggestion or solution to our problems that we're not aware of.
Okay. So I'm gonna move on to Mike now. Mike, what is the best way to go about looking for a topic if you want to potentially get into competition for an SBIR contract?
Well, the DoD is nice that way, that they have very specific solicitations, or at least we find that to be nice, as opposed to the generic, we want a better medical diagnostic device that just opens it up to everything. So typically the DoD it might be very specific to a weapon system that the Army asks for a improved fuel efficiency of a diesel engine, or we need a way that a soldier can go in the field and measure water toxicity, for example, which is the program that we're now selling to the Army as a product. So the SBIR solicitation comes out. Each of those topics that Nicole talked about is specific to a particular organization where they have a problem or a need, and they put out, we want a better way to do this, and you're free to just dream up whatever idea that you want, and as long as it meets those needs. And the phase 1, the focus of that is to prove the feasibility of your process or your hypothesis. We like to build hardware in phase 1, not just do paper studies, because we just find that to be a little more convincing than a big stack of paper with equations on it. And then the phase 2 is where you develop a prototype. Again, in hardware, it's going to be a physical device that is not ready for manufacturing necessarily, but it provides the user a way to measure the capability of what you developed and whether it meets their needs, and they can feedback on what needs to change or what works, what doesn't work. In terms of software, I mean that works the same way. They can run it through the gauntlet. And then the goal there is to go into phase 3, which could be, it depends on the process. It could be an advanced development program to do those military isms, right? The making it more environmentally sound and all the security issues with it. You know, if you have something that's based on an Android platform, well, you're probably not going to have your Samsung phone on the Sprint network. It's going to have a specialized kernel that you're going to have to develop that has all the security features if that's part of your device.
So tell us about the proposal process. Like, what's it like to, the topics get released. So the reason why we're doing this focused on SBIR is because the SBIR 19.2 topics, I think officially, they were pre-released, which means you can read the topics and figure out what you want to go after about 2 weeks ago. And the actual solicitations open on June 1st and they go through July 1st, this phase. So if you're thinking about doing one of these, like literally in a week and a half, you can start submitting.
What's the best website to look at these topics and find out information about them?
The website I actually saw was published earlier, but it's the SBIRDefense.org. From there, we normally would post our solicitation, but this particular time they're having it posted at FedBizOpps. But there's a direct link to bring you back to either the SBIR or STTR, or you can just look it up directly at FedBizOpps.org, and that would be either the 19.2 for SBIR or the 19.b for STTR.
And then the CITIS site still on that?
No, it's not.
The CITIS site, SITIS, is a nice one if they get it back up. Are they going to get it back up?
We're not sure yet.
Well, that was
right
nice.
now, it's open communication between you and the topic author. So if you're even remotely interested in submitting to SBIRSTTR right now, best time to look for topics is immediately and find out who that topic author is or topic authors. Their names, emails, phones are listed. My best advice is send an email. Trying to get some of these men or women on the phone is very difficult during this time. So write your questions or schedule a meeting so you can have a conversation with them. That way you can talk about what you plan on doing without the entire world knowing about it. That closes on June 1st, so you have a short window to be able to have that opportunity of speaking.
And there's
with
obviously very
the
nice
authors.
keyword searches, but
Yes.
for a company, if you have I have a feeling a lot of you have a particular idea in mind and you're looking for a place for it to land, which is a little bit different than a lot of our business where we just have very smart people who have a lot of mind activity, want to try new things. So that opens up the solicitation to, we're interested in almost everything a lot of times. But with a nice keyword search, of course, you can target a particular solicitation and then just contact that topic author and determine, run your idea by them and get it, hopefully you can get in a conversation with them to see if it's worth proposing. Because writing a proposal is not that simple of a task.
So let's get into that. So describe what the proposal consists of, like how long does it take, what are the parts, what do you need to communicate?
So the typical phase 1 proposal is on the order of 20 pages. You can think of it as probably 10 to 15 pages of meat, where you have a section of it's not too much different than a college research paper or a peer-reviewed journal article, where you identify the problem, give background on state of the art in that area, then you would present your proposal idea and then create the basis for that proposal idea and back it up with sound science or sound, again, I get uncomfortable with the software side. Code, I guess, no, I don't know. And then there's some back-end sections which are in the boilerplate category that describes the principal investigator, gives a bio sketch on the people working on the proposal, some words on your company's capabilities, your facilities and operations, and there's some other sections on use of foreign personnel. I think that about covers it.
And commercialization as well.
Commercialization, oh yeah, of course.
Don't miss that.
Don't miss that one. It's which with the DoD is a very important one, but Nicole can correct me or state more on this, but the DoD commercialization is really more of getting your technology into a DoD weapon system, right? As opposed to well, this technology's got dual use and it's going to be the next greatest graphite Gulf driver or something. I mean, that could also be part of the commercialization plan. And those success stories do happen where you develop a technology for the military and it has a dual use that, the government also wants return on investment. They're giving you equity-free investment, and they want you to do great things for the company or the country as a whole. But they also want to solve their particular need within the DoD. And so that's about, it's typically on a phase one, maybe 3 pages or so, 2 to 3 pages of what is your commercialization plan? How are you going to transition this technology to both solve the government's problem and potentially do some other things for the country as a whole?
What about cost? How do you communicate what the program costs? Or you may envision a solution that you think is going to cost $15 million to produce, or you may envision a solution that you can do for $15,000, but you still want $1 million out of the project. You know what I'm saying? How do you communicate it? What does it consist of?
Well, it's an interesting point because I don't know how rare this is, but we have many times bid a SBIR for less than the maximum value.
Yeah.
Especially on the phase twos, if it's something that is a bigger deliverable. But generally speaking, just the research and development in general it's never really completed, right? It's just abandoned when you run out of time. So if you have $150,000, I mean, the way you of course have to cost it is you have to determine the level of effort, the type of people required to do that. You'll end up having to understand your company's overhead because the government's not interested in bankrupting you if you don't know the concept of a loaded labor hour, and it doesn't do them any good if you get halfway through a phase one and you've spent all your money and you can't continue. So you have to apply your direct labor hours for the personnel that are working on the program, apply the cost to operate the business, put that on top of it. Any materials, that's all put in the proposal, have to be justified. Travel has to be justified. Travel always seems to get scrutinized, so we tend to leave it out and just travel on overhead if we need to. I think
How often, back to you, how often do the proposals come out and they're right at or maybe just under the maximum for that phase, for that program?
Are you asking how much normally they are?
No, like, I've heard rumors that basically every single SBIR program, regardless of what it is, the proposal is for basically the exact same price, which is whatever the program maximum is. So tell me about that and how true you believe that statement to be.
Well, I can't actually tell you,
Okay.
but we have to be a little, we can't give direct information on the actual
Fair enough.
funding portion of it. We do advise you to make sure you do include your direct and indirect costs. And what you do put in your proposal is what you're going to get. So if suddenly you see that what you proposed is not gonna cover all of it, you're gonna have to take certain things out of your proposal, and that's what will be discussed with your contracting officer. So the better you have that prepared prior to submitting it, the faster your award will take place, because we've had some who value what they're doing, as well as some who've overvalued. Travel within a phase one is usually considered a no-no.
Right.
Phase two, it is more just a few cost things that are in there.
Yeah, so the costs are always, they're going to be scrutinized. I mean, the technical monitor, the people who review it, right, they're going to look at it and see if they're like, wait, these guys are basically just proposing the conversion of this app to a military need. I mean, that they should be able to do that in like 2 weeks, and they're asking for $1 million. It's not going to fly. And then of course, from the audit perspective, they'll look at your cost proposal in the phase two during the negotiation and justify everything you're saying you need for that contract. You're gonna have to justify it, and then on the back end of that, you get audited to see if you spent the money the way you did, and you have both the DCAA audit and then there's a DCMA audit, which they happen a little bit less frequently. But they also look at, okay, you said you're gonna use these certain labor categories to solve this particular problem. They'll even look technically at, well, that doesn't seem appropriate, right? You're using an electrical engineer to do the job of a technician or something, and charging the government for that, and that things like that won't fly.
All right, now to Patrick. So Patrick, when did you get your first Phase 1 award?
So we received it in about March.
So tell us about Phase 1, and tell us about, I want you to
Yeah.
kind of tell us a story about, you're performing a Phase 1 right now while simultaneously preparing a proposal to try to graduate into Phase 2.
Sure.
And then if you could turn to your left and ask the first question of the Ask Me Anything, to Mike, like,
Yeah.
Man, I wish that I had known this, or this is way harder than I thought it was.
Yeah,
Am I doing it the right way,
So, I mean, the hardest part for us, I'd say, is so we applied, and there's no like LinkedIn for the military. If I want to do an enterprise deal, like I'm looking up people on LinkedIn and being like, okay, this is probably the decision maker or the three that I need to talk to, and then I'm reaching out to them and trying to set up a meeting, doing all the normal stuff. For the military, I mean, some people are on LinkedIn, but one of the hardest parts of the Phase 1 and the Phase 1 with AthWorks, they're giving you $50K to basically find stakeholders that have a need for your technology. So on the outside, that's like, wow, I'm gonna get paid to find this stakeholder. That sounds great. Like in your average business, you're not usually paid to go out and find business. But the reality now, being in kind of the last month of this, is it's not easy, and you got to be resourceful and really actually put a lot of work in to finding these people. And you mentioned, I think Sensei, David
Zachariah? Yeah.
Right, and I actually watched him do a panel, and he's the program of record you mentioned that's got several million.
Well, Pilot Next is, and they're part of the package that's going into that programming.
But listening to him, like it actually sounded very familiar to my own experiences. Like he had to be a squeaky wheel, as he described it, to get the attention and stay top of mind. Even though obviously he has great technology, it still required some elbow grease to find the right people to further his product. So I would say, one of the hardest parts I see for companies is you have a great technology, you have a great vision, a great product, but maybe you're just not great at enterprise sales or finding people and really selling the vision. And I think you almost need to take that mentality to this just as much, that you're gonna have to find these people that champion your product and technology.
All right, with that, I'm gonna open it up to the group. We talked for a little more than half the time. Who's got a question? Yeah.
Nicole, you mentioned that June 1st to July 1st for the SBI, that's the DoD.
Correct, that's for DoD.
Is there a project pitch mentorship for that program?
Not for that round, but I would keep your eye on that website to see there might be something coming up later this summer.
Could you state those two websites again, please?
It's SBIRSTTR, I think it is, and the other one is FedBizOpps.
What about protecting IP? If someone has a great idea and they're putting all of this into a proposal and sending it off to the government, is there a chance that the government is going to take ideas from multiple proposals and try and combine them into one?
No. I've been doing this for years and I've never, it's not even fathomed. But what happens is you actually, during that process, you have SBIR data rights for 20 years after you have submitted your project. So if you have something, you have a great idea, you've developed your widget to sell, At that point, you are the only one who has this for the government. So the government's always gonna go to ABC firm to buy that widget from you. And you have the IP rights, you can do an immediate contract for phase 3 with the government, having other government funding coming through. So that helps us, being the government, because we don't have to go through a competition to select you, because we know that ABC firm is the only one who developed this widget. So it can be a win-win situation. That's where we have the phase 3 contract can come in, or having that program of record, we can go directly to you. But those rights are yours, and we do suggest that once you do have something developed, that you contact an IP lawyer and make sure you have all your ducks in a row.
I have a question about the STTR versus SBIR. Is that 30%, well, first of all, I wonder if one of them is, if I can apply to both, right? And
Yes.
whether one of them is better, right, than the other for some reason. If you have like university support, if there's, I don't know, maybe there's some advantage. And then the other question is, are you losing 30% or is that an extra line item, right?
Okay, first question is SBIR or SIR one better than the other? No, they're looked at totally different. We have topics specifically just for the STTR side of the program, which is, those are usually more basic researchy, is probably the best way to put it, because we want to have that university and small business be able to take something out of the university and bring it to commercialization so that the warfighter can have whatever that idea might be developed from. We have a lot of researchers. They get their PhD from such and such a college. They start up their own small business because they have an idea, and that's where they can have their university startup from. There's not an extra line item. It's from the so it's this, you get the 150K for an STTR. Actually, it's more than that now. But that 30% has to come from that total. It is a separate line item, and it will be looked at. So you have to make sure that you include that, because we have had small businesses who submitted, said, I'm going to work with the University of Texas, and suddenly they don't put that funding amount in there. They'll automatically be kicked out without even a review. So you have to meet that and make sure it's included in that line item. Minimally 30% is included in there. You can go more than that. And a small business minimally has to have 40%. So that is the only restriction on the STTR side. SBIR, you can also have a subcontractor, and you can subcontract with the university. There's no minimum at that point for them, but the small business has to have it minimally 51%. So the small business has to receive at least that much. The rest of that can be to one or more subcontractors. And your second question?
Well, the IP rights, you mentioned the IP rights, does that go partially to the university and partially to the PI, or how does that negotiate on a contract by contract?
That will be negotiated within the contract. Usually the IP rights are directly to the small business, so it can be a little tricky dealing with a university, but we have many universities who've been there, done that. So talking to the university up front and letting them know, this is our plan, this is what we want to do, we have this idea, would you be willing to work with us? Finding that information out early and establishing a good relationship early on is the best way to make sure those IP rights are for you, the small business, as well as the university professor can be the PI of that contract and actually can be the owner of the small business.
Yeah, most of the DoD contracts, the STTR requires a special STTR agreement to be in place with the university to help, I presume, to protect the university. And those do need to be in place, even for the phase 1. But that forces an agreement between the small business and the university. But like Nicole said, most universities know how to do that, and
So Mike,
usually be reasonable.
since you've done both, his perspective or his question on which one's better, you know, has one been more comfortable for you than the other?
STTRs are usually, I think, tend to be less competitive. There's less people who submit to them. It really depends on your company makeup. So for us that kind of deals with closer to basic research, we do a lot of university. I'd say I would think for a company that has an idea and a goal, they have a process of just looking for a place in the military to apply it, I wouldn't think an STTR would be that applicable. So I'd say that'd be the biggest the biggest change is, like, I think Nicole said this, it's like STTR tends to be a little more basic research. SBIRs can be very applied research and almost bordering on, you know, system acquisition, and even though it's not probably supposed to be.
Please.
It's a bit of a different question, but my coworker Jordan and I work for a full-service audio vendor, Team Audio, and what we do is we provide voiceover, direction, and recording, casting as well.
That's out currently, and they're like, I don't fit anywhere within that, but I still have a really great idea. The best way to get the government to look at it is develop a quad chart. Where is it? What can you do with it? How much money do you need to bring it to fruition? So we want to be able to see those and see it quickly. There's a lot of things like that that pass through our email, so we want to make sure this is going to catch our eye, protect information. But I have quad chart examples that if you're interested in doing that, I'll be glad to help field those out and get those to the right individuals. That's one part of the job that I do, so I'll be glad to help you, you know, at least get your information in the right hands.
Okay, thank you.
What are y'all doing on June 6th?
We're gonna be right here.
All right, well, come talk to me in the happy hour afterwards, because Capital Factory is actually doing an innovation challenge on June 6th against an AR/VR problem for, well, not doing it for Army Applications Lab, it's their problem, and we just decided that we were gonna solve it for them, or at least find some companies that potentially could. So we're doing a 100K investment challenge on June 6th, but also, and really interestingly from your perspective, is how do I meet folks? The folks from the Army's cross-functional team for synthetic training environments, which is the folks that would be looking to build AR/VR enabled simulation training, are gonna be there. They're gonna be pitching their problem. They're gonna have the program SMEs there, and we're gonna be doing a whole bunch of demos up on the 8th floor of different companies with different takes on that type of capability. So maybe you guys should be one of the ones up there. Let's talk.
We'll be there.
I'm just gonna say one thing is like the fact that AFWorks, that Army Applications Lab, that Army Futures is here, and there are a ton of events. Like last night, TDIF had something. I mean, the power of a human connection in our digital world versus like sending yet another email is massive. And that's a huge advantage that everyone in this room has. So show up to those events. I met Kevin at one of those events. I hunted him down because he wasn't the venture guy yet, but I saw he had potential to become this. And you know, so, and
I think I've maxed out my potential, man. It's all down over
I introduced myself there. I got on his radar. I said, hey, we're in SBIR phase 1. We want to get to phase 2. You know, like, what can you do for me? Can you help me out?
Yeah. I made some promises and failed to deliver, but we're working on it.
Hey, so yeah, just like the opportunity that you have in person here versus like searching through like an electronic database that's available to the entire country is massive. So I would really encourage everyone here to use that.
Nicole, Pat, Mike, thanks for being here, guys. I know how valuable your time is. Nicole, I have questions for you. I read somewhere once that a contract under 10K can be paid with government credit card.
Yes, there is a certain contract that can be done that way. Currently, Army does not do that.
Okay, so Army doesn't do it. You can tell who I've been talking to. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Under SBIR, right, there is, again, with the folks I'm talking to, what they call an open topic, which is where we fit. Is the Army...
The Army is thinking about doing those. It's not anything that's been in writing yet, but what he's talking about by an open topic is that they're going to have a topic idea that's going to be posted within a BAA. It's usually, they consider them special topics. And Army has been considering doing that. I believe Navy's already done it, or Air Force, one of the others.
That's what we're in.
You're in the
is
open
an
topic.
Open topic.
Right.
Again, like there's no
open
line
topic-
item asking for like a digital fitness solution. It was an open topic.
The open topic, so Capital Factory has this sign that we have up all over the place that says, always make an exception for awesome. And that's what the open topic is. If you have something that's awesome, tell us about it, maybe you...
Because they actually approached me about coming into the Outworks program because they saw what we were doing with other customers. So the other question I have is, we're in knowledge management, AI and all that stuff. Our labor rates are quite high. Is that something that SBIR would understand?
It's probably the best way to say, is it feasible? That's always what the government's gonna look at. Is it fair and reasonable?
I'm brand new to this.
So as long as you
educate
can
me.
justify, you know, paying an administrative assistant $100 an hour might be a little excessive, but as long as you can justify those rates that you're proposing in your proposal.
And we pay even our interns a living wage, I mean, which is substantially more than what you would call market. Is that gonna be an issue?
As long as it's fair and reasonable.
Okay, all right. I won't compromise on that.
You have been audited by DCA, I can hear.
So,
Yes, I've been audited.
Fair-
by-
fair-
That's fine, I've been audited, it's easy.
It's easier than it sounds.
Yeah, it's just, it's just be honest.
It's easier than the IRS. I've been through both.
So the other question is then, to find out because I'm pretty sure we're into knowledge management. This could be classified as a better search engine or something like that, although I hesitate to say that. I guess there would be an open topic on the Army side that would fit that.
There's
Where
a
would we find it?
there's a possibility. What, you're gonna be seeing those, just like I mentioned earlier with DOD, with the open BAA, they're having the 19.2, you're gonna be seeing a lot more, open topics within there, cause the whole DOD program is trying to do better, faster, so you're gonna be seeing a lot of changes, not just with Army, but with all of the DOD departments, because they're looking for finding out what you want. Sometimes there's solutions already out there, but we're not asking it in the right way, or the right people aren't seeing those BAAs. So we're trying to put an open topic. It's probably the best way to say it. So you can propose to us an idea that you have, that you've been successful, and there might be a direct to phase 2. That's something else you're gonna see a little bit more
The application is
of.
actually to help manage the SBIR program itself.
Okay.
So it's like an inward-looking kind of thing. And I have another question. I always have another question, sorry.
Go right ahead.
But this one's for Mike. So you do so we're kind of similar in the sense that we do a lot of IP stuff.
Right.
And when you propose that, I'm basing all of our solution on this theory that's as of yet unproven, but it's better than anything out there so far. What happens, is there a performance requirement in the contract once you get your SBIR funding? What happens if you get to the end and you go, oh, I can't make it work?
Well, I think I understand the question. The statement of work that you propose, or the proposal usually stands as a statement of work for the DoD proposals.
Okay.
And so, it's usually viewed as best effort. There are times when you have a very hard deliverable, and you just have to be careful in your contract negotiation of how you put that in the contract to sign up for it to deliver such said deliverable. That if it's something that is the home run shot that has like a 0.2% probability of happening, you probably don't want that as a contract deliverable.
All right. But you can't put in
So-
there, we're gonna do our best efforts to, we're
Abs-
pretty confident in this.
absolutely,
We're getting a lot of
yeah.
good traction, so we
I
think
mean,
it's pretty awesome. But I've been around business long enough to know that sometimes deals go south, baby.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing you can do about it, so I just wanted to make sure that all of a sudden we wouldn't be all looking at jail time or something.
When you're submitting your proposal.
I'm sorry, my equation's wrong, take me away.
Well, when you're submitting a proposal, we expect you to say that, yes, I anticipate to be able to do X, Y, Z. If not, why would we select you? It's like,
Right,
well,
right.
we're not sure if this will happen, or we're not sure. No, we don't want that proposal.
But
We
if
want
it's
you
an
to be.
identified risk or something.
Right, it's R&D, we anticipate risk,
Okay,
and
alright.
sometimes the result of your phase 2 is, it didn't work. And that is an acceptable deliverable at the end.
Unpleasant, but.
Yes,
okay.
we made the box, it has the handle, but it keeps breaking off, we can't fix that.
Alright.
So that is okay, that's your deliverable at the end of the project.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are proposals ever made public, or can they be retrieved by a FOIA request?
They can be retrieved by that, but anything that you mark on your proposal that says, not classified, but,
Proprietary.
thank you. So just make sure that you do that as well as your cost proposal will never be made public. So anything you have in there financially, that will never be made public. The only thing that's normally made public, even in a FOIA request, will be your abstract.
Okay,
You're welcome.
There are, in the contract, they typically ask for a non-proprietary statement of work. Again, it depends on the DoD agency. I think those are not readily available made public, but due to Freedom of Information Act, I think those contracts.
Contracts are
Could-
made available only through the EDA, which some
Yeah.
individual, you have to be approved to have access to that.
But
So,
generally,
yes.
the government does a great job of, I mean, they treat your proposal like it's a classified document. And they do not share it. If they have any in-house contractors with them, they have tight agreements that, you know, they can't take your idea and give it to their favorite company or their brother-in-law or anything.
Even a government has to sign an NDAC, a non-disclosure or conflict of interest on every proposal that they review.
And in our experience, I mean, the government takes that very, very seriously.
That covers, like RFI, white papers and that type of thing as well, that aren't formal proposals?
Correct. Anything
As
that
long as it's
we
marked.
receive, as long as it's marked,
Yeah.
yes, but even if you send us an email with an
But-
idea, we're not gonna send that to our
Yeah,
brother and say,
I was
hey,
gonna
here,
say,
do this.
I mean,
So-
I would mark it, but again, I also, you know, having served, you know, it was beat into me that you,
Right.
yeah, you err on the side of you protect the heck out of it. It's just like.
We have an
handling classified.
overarching conflict of interest, non-disclosure for just being a government worker,
Yeah.
including our contractors who work with us. They also are held very tightly to those agreements.
Quick question on the statement of work. So you say statement of work, are those generally fixed fee? Do they force you to do it one way, fixed fee or T&M?
Again, it depends on the program or the contracting office, but more and more of them are going to firm fixed price. Used to be that most of the phase twos were known as cost plus fixed fee with a ceiling, so it kind of maxes out. But I think most of them are now going to firm fixed price. So once you negotiate, you know, it's totally up to you how to execute. And the biggest difference is, you know, firm fixed price, you're gonna be getting paid, typically you're gonna be getting paid progress payments of a certain amount each month or with each report. Typically, the government likes to have something to pay your invoice, you know, that could be just a monthly report or a bi-monthly report. Cost plus fixed fee, you actually bill your actuals, and so you don't get paid until you work them, and then that's how the contract works, if that makes sense.
Nicole, I'm sorry, I have one more question. This is a really cool platform. I already have customers on it, and they're paying me for it, so it's already has a commercial application. The money that we would receive from DoD, anybody, would be to improve that platform generally, which would mean those other customers would continue to benefit. Is that an issue? Does that raise an issue?
Potentially, but that would have to be something, there would be a type of agreement between the government and you during that process of negotiation. Just make sure anytime that you're dealing with a government contract, fully disclose any information you have to your contracting officer. If you have another contract that's very similar work with DARPA and you're also working with ECBC, make sure that those contracting folks know that you have those two contracts. It's okay that you're doing two contracts, but if there's any type of overlap, that contracting officer can help you, not for double dipping, because we want to make sure that you're not accidentally marking something, so.
It's not that, it's just that as we develop the technology, it gets rolled into the entire platform. So the things that would be benefiting the project we're working on.
Right, there might
Also,
be IP
the
rights, you
others-
might want to mention that to the
Yeah, I'm not
contracting
worried
officer,
about
right.
that part. But yeah, so, but the idea is it's gonna lift all the boats, right?
Mhm.
And we make money on the other side. So it's like we don't double dip, but we get double
Right.
benefit, right? And so all we have to do is just disclose that.
Right, the government just doesn't wanna pay for something someone else is paying for. So if you're doing research and development and you're improving that
Gotcha. Okay, I got it.
with whatever the government's paying you for those improvements, they don't want you to be getting money from XYZ company paying you for the exact same work.
And how much can you help us in the process? Because you can tell I'm brand new to this and I want to do it right the first time. So can I consult with you? Can I
Absolutely.
send you questions and stuff like that?
Absolutely.
And I don't want to put anybody in any ethical
I'm allowed to answer questions that, usually the
Right.
only things that I have to be careful on is telling you how much to charge, to bill. We just can't give you, or IP information. I have to forward you to an IP
What
lawyer.
about completeness? Like if I sent you, I said, this is what I'm planning to cover, does this cover everything you need, kind of thing?
Cannot review your proposal.
Right, you can't review it?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, if
I
you have
will
questions on how to
mention-
prepare the proposal,
Yeah, I'm
that's something a
super
little
curious.
different.
But you're delving into some slightly complicated, dangerous areas in terms of your accounting system.
Okay, that's why I'm asking.
Right.
If you have commercial contracts, right now, you probably don't have timesheets, you're not doing all the government cost accounting that you're going to have to do if you have a government contract. And, because what the government's gonna wanna know is that you don't have a commercial contract that's paying you to do something. You're not billing that, and all you're doing is billing the government for all of those hours. And so your employee timesheet's showing 40 hours a week, developing something specifically for the government, when in actuality, that employee's spending half their time or more doing the commercial system.
So
So,
we're
that
so
you're gonna have to.
charge by transaction, so I just need to reveal that at the beginning and say. that's
Right.
pretty good.
So if you have 2 buckets of paint and you're gonna use half of it for your commercial and half of it for the government, you just wanna make sure that that's exactly what you're doing and that you can trace that back. Cause if you get DCA audited, which
Yeah.
with those kind of tricky, sticky situations, normally
Right.
you're gonna be looked at a little more closely. And it's not just because the government's gonna, their scary hands over you. It's also to protect you as the company so that you
Right.
are paid properly for the work that
And
you
if we
do.
start going over the line, we get a chance to remedy that, right?
Right. I would
That
suggest
means-
starting
Just see us.
Just-
right the first time. And even, we can't tell you to hire anyone, but even having an accountant to, have those conversations with
Okay.
before even getting
Yeah.
in with contracting, that
So I
might
can see
be
you doing
advisable.
Yeah, it turns out the ignorance of the FAR is not defense.
Yes.
All right, we are at the time limit, so I'm gonna give an opportunity for one person to ask a question who hasn't asked one yet.
I have a question for, if you're thinking about this strategically as a small company, is there maybe, certain organizations that you can apply for funding from where you have a better chance of getting funding because the barriers to entry aren't so high? So I'm just guessing, but my assumption would be that the Air Force, the barriers to entry for a lot of the things that they wanna do are gonna be quite high for a company that maybe only has 10 to 12 people, doesn't have a huge amount of cash flow, something like that. I mean, I don't know if you track kind of what the general size is of the companies are coming in.
We do, and the majority of them are usually 2 to 3 employees, believe it or not, when they first start out. Basically, when you're submitting your proposal, it doesn't matter if you have 499 employees or 1 employee working on the project. It's how well technically you can present your idea and how well commercially you're gonna follow up with it. And who is working on there? Do you have the background, the capabilities to do what you said you're capable of doing? We don't know you, so you could say, I'm the best in my field. We'll back it up with your resume. Show us some of that background, show us some things that you've already done and you've accomplished previously. So that we know that, yes, this company can do what they said they can do, because we went back and saw their references, we went and saw this, we saw that they're capable of doing that, and their research is sound, and where they're planning on going forward is reasonable and innovative. That's one thing we're constantly looking at in the SBIRSTTR. Is this an innovative idea? Not just putting wheels on something we already know. We want it to be totally out of the box sometimes. That's sometimes a high risk for you as a small business proposing something like that, but sometimes high risk has high reward. So that's something to think about as a small business.
All right, thank you very much. And I will just add my 2 cents that AFWorks, and Jen is there in the back of the room, has, I think, made the biggest strides towards lowering that bar to entry. So the Air Force, I think your assumption is actually flipped. I think AFWorks has made the Air Force the easiest branch to work with in terms of how quickly can you get a contract. So I want to thank the panelists so much for coming. This was, I think, great for the very first ever. So right out the door and around the corner to the left, is the happy hour, where I certainly hope the collisions, so Capital Factory is certainly about this, but really it's mostly about this. And I have found that the collisions over cocktails after the event always seem to be where kind of the best deals get made, so please join us for that, and I'm really glad you guys all showed up.
No, I'm really congratulations on making your first phase.
Yeah.
I was loving
I told you it'd be easy, mostly because you're brilliant. Mostly because you're brilliant. When you're brilliant, things are easy.
So we're fired up.
So he has to face 2 questions.
I do. He's like, it was a soft. Thanks for being here.
Probably. It only exists to me in the form of a shareable file on a Google Drive, and it's got a whole bunch of other slides that you can't have. So I'm gonna figure out how to do that. Yeah, you know what?
We're in jail. So it's like the reason why
that chart is showed about decreasing government spending, R&D, and increase in business.
Don't be overstressed by
Big
that. That's a
corporates like
contract
us have
issue.
nothing.
Normally, you
We're
don't
trying to get back
kick
there.
out.
So I'm trying to make a case on
Financially, as long
two
as it's
things.
not,
One,
you
how
know,
do we
we're
get back
paying you $1,000 an hour. So
What's
as long as you have, what requirements do you have to travel?
That's why
you have to do, this is where this is my direct cost, this is my indirect cost.
I'm gonna go have these conversations where the beer
So
is.
I'm taking hours.
Are you waiting to talk to me or?
No, I was gonna talk to you.
Oh, right.
You're good. So don't panic about that part of it. We don't want you to
still worried about
that's a contract thing. I want you to negotiate. They'll be like, for our medical. Going to tour conferences here might be a bit much. They'll ask you to back that out type thing.
So those usually
I gotta get a beer right now.
is a program like kind of be like, hey, this is causing us like some.
Oh, yeah, he was the one who
financial on the back side.
But if I end up getting it, I'd like to talk to you.
They're gonna
about
tell you that
how
up
you
front.
built
They're not gonna let you go. We're just gonna wait for him to mess up. We're not gonna do
Well, I
it.
mean, yeah.
They'll tell you up front.
I mean, the short answer is we
And
didn't
they'll
build
say,
it up
well,
with UD.
we
They
want you
built
to
the Capital
do
Factory
more
and
in
UD
this area
said,
because you can move
that's
the
what
money
we want.
around.
Yeah.
This, but
Let's
even
go
your
do some of
program
that.
manager might give
Got
you
it.
a suggestion.
Yeah.
how you
We've
work.
had that come
We
back
have joint base.
where someone's left, you
how we
have
work
this
together.
technical person that was supposed to do A, B, and C.
Alright,
Big part of the con, and then leaves just as you were selected. We do give you time to find this person.
What the innovation
So
center
we're not gonna,
is.
oh,
in
you
San
lost the main
Antonio
person of our team.
That we're working with.
What are we gonna do? We do give you that time in the contract to get that fixed. In your contract, we'll discuss those things with you. So if you have questions about anything.
Do you have a card?
Yes, I'll be glad to give you that, so. Definitely, I'll be glad to send you a copy of that. That way I can get you in touch with the correct person technically.
Yeah, so somebody else said that as well. So can we like PDF these slides and send them out to the sign up list? Like, is that possible?
Currently,
I
the program,
could-
currently the program
yeah.
does not go, oh, it's a
Or-
own company.
Yeah.
We're just like, it's not done that way.
Well, I was just thinking, yeah, we usually, what we
There's always
usually do,
that integrating that
is we
might
have the slides
happen
already in
later
the
on.
event, right? But since this is like
For
kind of our
a
first
company,
Yeah.
for different other.
real
What she's saying
contracts.
is that Kevin didn't do the slides until last night at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Definitely.
After I got home from my TDIF event, and I was
With whomever.
No, but, yeah, but I'll send that to you guys.
Right, other contracts might not.
Also.
Sorry.
Oh,
I was gonna ask for an email.
Rebecca's gonna give us references.
I will give you
Oh,
my
you have
card.
a
Yeah,
I have a card.
Say